Jamar Papagitan, and I'm doing a critical lens reading on the story Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. So, Lolita is a great book for conceptualizing psychoanalytic theory, and it is layered with much Freudian interpretations and ideas. I feel what Nabokov mocks most throughout the story are clear impressions of ego, and around that notion, it seems as though the central theme of Lolita bases around the mind of the protagonist Humbert Humbert and his emotional justifications, suggesting that when people base their actions deeply in their ego, they're hurting themselves as well as the others around them. One event or point that helps develop this theme is the structure of Humbert's mind and evidence of him being driven by his base instincts that were probably beginning with Annabelle, who is the success of Humbert's ego. So Annabelle is a 12-year-old girl whom Humbert met when he was 13, and they had a love relationship in the summer of 1923. 4 months later, she died of typhus, and in Mourn, she can be defined as a precursor for Humbert's hemophilia. In chapter 4, even Humbert attempts to directly state how he is self-aware of how Annabelle provided the frame or spell for Nymphets and then his love for Lolita. He goes on by saying, I also know that the shock of Annabelle's death consolidated frustration of that nightmare summer, made of it a permanent obstacle to any further romance throughout the cold years of my youth, until at last, 24 years later, I broke her spell by incarnating her in another. Lolita. And yeah, this concept of Humbert's ego is established by this event as Annabelle constitutes a frame for his hepaphilia. As he experiences this in his leaning youth, it hurts him as it leans his superego and creates an internalized representative ideal of hepaphilia, or more acceptance of it at least, and his desire for violating innocence of little girls, which is clear of how it hurts others physically and psychologically in this society. I teleported. Anyways, transitioning from the introduction of Humbert's ego, we are going to his appearance of his id. And one event would be is when the police officer approaches the car where Lolita is kissing him. And looking at this event through a psychoanalytic lens, the id of Humbert, or rather his instinctual desires, begin to appear in conflict with his ego and superego, deciding on whether he should respond with awareness of society's norms and feel shameful, his superego, whether he should potentially display interest in the officer's need, his ego, and lastly, whether he should continue to worry about Lolita and maintain composure of the officer, his id. Can also detail on the actions of the other people during this event. Lolita kissing him displays her own understanding and it can be a physical interpretation of Humbert's id, while the police officer, as authority, would be interpreted as his superego. This event develops Humbert's id as Lolita takes control of the situation, rather simulating the id taking over his superego. From this experience, Humbert accepts his desires, thinking Lolita would fulfill them. This further allows Humbert to destroy Lolita's innocence and think less of his taboo and social norms. Another event that develops this theme is when Humbert goes to enact revenge on his shadow, Claire Quilty, and kill him for kidnapping Lolita and stealing her love. In this event, Humbert's id takes over his ego, and there is no balance or rationality. He only acts upon emotional nature with no self-control. His values and basic instincts are all that matter here, and even though he keys at this moment that he was aware and that he only reserved obsession, possession, and desirable ideas of Lolita, and that he was merely a subject of her life and nothing more, he was still obligated to kill Quilty. And I quote his sulking matters of realization in chapter 32. In order to enjoy my phantasms in peace, I firmly decided to ignore that I could not help perceiving the fact that I was to her not a boyfriend, not a glamour man, not a pal, not even a person at all, but just 2 eyes and a foot of engorged broad. To mention only mentionable matters. Pretty sad, but ultimately this leads to his own downfall. Acting upon his id, he kills Quilty, then drives recklessly with stress, and in turn gets arrested. Humbert can also be viewed as psychologically confined in prison, as to allow him to write his story, still praising Lolita and detailing texts with id-driven emotions based on the experiences. You could even see here he has destroyed himself, and if he hadn't been controlled by his id, the people around him could still be alive, sure precariously, but he could still potentially have protected them. Cruelty, Charlotte, and Lolita could still have been alive, yeah, and Lolita could have remained innocent and lived upon social norm. But the point is, he destroyed them, their values, their thinking, and their lives. In conclusion, these are only a few points that display the central theme around the structure of Humbert's mind and the emotional justifications that when people act upon their ego, they hurt themselves and the others around them. Through psychoanalytical lens, Nabokov's Lolita shows that the developed ego of Humbert is driven by his id and that it ultimately destroyed him. Thank you for listening to my critical lens reading on Lolita. I wish you a wonderful winter break and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.